Hello people of the internet and welcome to the first ever episode of gaurdianAQ Reviews. Today we will be talking about the indie horror sensation that took the internet by storm, Five Nights at Freddy's, also known as FNAF. Warning, this video may contain jump scares. You have been warned. If you've followed YouTubers since 2015, you've probably heard of FNAF, and love it or hate it, you can't deny the significant impact the series has had on YouTube and gaming culture. So for those of you who haven't heard of Five Nights at Freddy's, it's an indie horror series created by Scott Cawthon. The first game was released on August 8th, 2014, and since then has spawned 4 sequels, a spin-off, a book with a second one on the way, a movie in the works, FNAF merchandise, its own haunted house, not to mention the crazy amount of knockoff FNAF games, such as Five Nights at Candy's, Five Nights at the Krusty Krabs, Those Nights at Rachel's, One Night at Flumpty's, and that doesn't even begin to scratch the tip of the iceberg. Heck, I did a search for Five Nights at Freddy's knockoffs and found a list with over 1,000 entries. And don't even get me started on some of the fan art out there. Yeesh. Needless to say, this series has exploded. You'd be hard-pressed to find a major YouTuber who hasn't played at least one of these games, and it was popular enough on YouTube to be included as part of the 2015 YouTube Rewind, which, for those who haven't heard of it, it's an annual video produced by YouTube to highlight the most popular content on YouTube for that year. But enough about that. Let's take a critical look at the gameplay. In most of the games, you're hired as a security guard, either at a pizzeria or a horror attraction, and you sit in your office and try to prevent the animatronics from getting into the room you're sitting in. If they do, well then... The concept seems novel at first. Keep an eye on the animatronics on the cameras, maintain your power, shut the doors when they get too close. But when you look closer at the mechanics, it begins to fall apart. In most of the games, you'll eventually begin to realize that there's a best pattern to follow, and that sometimes certain mechanics can be ignored entirely. The best example of this is in the first game. You're told to keep an eye on the animatronics through the camera system, when in reality, the only camera you actually have to keep an eye on is Foxy's. This is because the rest of the animatronics can only attack you when the camera is up. Why is that, you may be wondering? Well, that's because unlike Foxy, they don't actually have an animation of them entering the room. Foxy's sole purpose in the first game is to make sure you don't just win the game by never lifting up the camera. But even if you perfectly follow the ideal pattern, you're still not guaranteed to survive the night, since the animatronics movements is based on a random number generator. You could be doing everything perfectly and still lose because Foxy decided to knock on your door one too many times. The core gameplay stays largely the same up until Sister Location, where Scott shakes things up a bit and that each night is essentially its own challenge or minigame, rather than each night being a harder version of the same gameplay. While this fixes the problem of having a set pattern to follow throughout each night, it also didn't allow the types of challenges that the previous games had. And while Scott did later add a custom night mode to provide some extra replayability, it was essentially a rehash of the first game's gameplay, complete with the same issue of forcing the player into a set pattern. Another important aspect of these games is their ability to scare you. Without the horror element, the game might as well just be called Sitting Simulator. The games do a good job of creating a scary atmosphere with the use of its imagery and ambient sound effects, so that when the jump scare does come, you're already tense. I find this works for a bit in the beginning, but as you start to play, you become numb to it. The one exception to this, I feel, is Five Nights at Freddy's 4, and this is because it's focused around listening to audio cues to survive, rather than visual cues. You're forced to listen closely to determine whether the animatronics are near, and because you're so focused on audio, the jump scares stay effective. Now, that's not to say the gameplay doesn't have its merits. I'm a very analytical person, and many people won't notice these flaws. The simplicity of the gameplay combined with the startling jump scares makes it an ideal game for Let's Players. In fact, some Let's Players even got their big break trying to solve the story of Five Nights at Freddy's. What's that? Five Nights at Freddy's has a story? I hear you ask. Why, yes, and in my opinion, it's probably one of the series' stronger points. Now, quick note, I don't have time to go into every little detail about the story, so you'll have to take my word on some of this. If you want to learn more about the stories and theories surrounding this series, I highly recommend you check out MatPat's videos over on the Game Theorist channel. At first glance, the story seems pretty simple. Listen to some phone calls, play some mini-games, and survive the night. It all seems pretty cut and dry. But to truly learn the story of Five Nights at Freddy's, you have to look a bit deeper. In each of the games, Scott has left clues hidden in the background of the story. In FNAF 1, the environment will randomly change to reveal more story elements. In FNAF 2, there's a random chance when you die that an Atari-style minigame will appear which further expands on the lore of the series. This trend of hidden content continues throughout the series. I think this is a fun and unique way to tell a story, as it almost becomes like a treasure hunt to unravel the lore. But as fun as this is, the problem is that for every question that a new game answers, 2 more end up being asked. A major event in this series is the Bite of 1987, where someone was bit in the head by one of the animatronics, leading to the restaurant to be shut down. In FNAF 4, during the Night 5 minigame, we very clearly see a child get bit in the head by an animatronic. Mystery solved, right? Not so fast there. During the Night 3 minigame of FNAF 4, if you turn on the TV in the living room, you'll see a commercial of sorts saying, Fredbear and Friends, 1983. Why is this important? Because it suggests the date 1983 is significant, which leads you to wonder whether or not these minigames take place in 1983 or 1987. But if that's the case, then what we see in Night 5 can't be the bite of 1987. This leads to debates about what the date 1983 means. Is it when the game takes place, or pointing to something else important to the story? Why include something so specific if it's not important? That one detail divided the community as to whether or not FNAF 4 depicts the bite of 87 or something else. And this isn't the only time this sort of thing happens either. Scott could have created something really great, but he continuously added more plot holes. I don't know if he did this on purpose to keep interest high, or he simply didn't realize that he was doing it. Overall, though, if you don't get too bored by repetitive jump scares, the games are fun for a bit, and the story is fun to look for, but ultimately, I feel the series could have been a lot better. Pick it up on sale, enjoy it for a bit, but don't try to think too hard on the lore, or you'll make your head hurt. Hope you all enjoyed this review, and thanks for watching!